All right, let's get started. Thanks everybody for joining and for signing up for this digital event. We're going to be discussing how Mass General Hospital drives nurse innovation. And there's also going to be parts where we talk about how nurse innovation can continue to drive nurse retention, which is another top priority and top concern that nursing leaders and HR leaders and operations leaders have today. So my name is Hiyam Nadel. I'm an MD. I've been in healthcare technology for the last few years of my career. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Incredible Health, which is a career marketplace for permanent healthcare workers. Incredible Health is the only platform that allows hospitals to hire permanent experienced nurses in 20 days or less. We flip the script, so hospitals and health systems apply to nurses instead of the other way around and waiting for nurses to apply to them. Joining us today is Hiyam Nadel, the director of the Center for Innovations in Care Delivery at Massachusetts General Hospital. Many of you are probably very familiar with Mass General, but I'm going to share a few accolades anyway. It ranks as one of the top hospitals in the United States by US News and World Report. In 2015, Mass General was recognized as the #1 hospital in America, and in 2019 was recognized as #2. In 2021, Mass General also ranked as #3 on the world's best hospitals list by Newsweek, and the American Nurses Credentialing Center recognizes Mass General Hospital for excellence in nursing, and it is a designated magnet hospital. Hiyam is a nurse by background as well. She earned her nursing degree from Northeastern University, a clinical genetics certificate from Brandeis University, an MBA from Babson College with a focus on innovation and entrepreneurship. Prior to accepting her current position, Hiyam played an essential role in reopening the Massachusetts General Hospital Obstetrics Department after a 40-year hiatus and implemented a new nurse care model and a medical home for obstetrics. In addition, she's been instrumental in designing IT programs, such as ambulatory patient tracking system there, and she co-authored the design of the OB EMR, an electronic medical record, which subsequently sold to Hewlett-Packard. In her current role, she's both a mentor and incubator of ideas for frontline caregivers, from conceiving an idea to prototyping and beyond. Thank you so much for being here, Hiyam.
Thank you so much. I'm thrilled to be here.
Awesome. So just so everybody's aware in the audience, we are recording the conversation today, and it will be shared with you afterwards. This is designed to be interactive, so please feel free to share your questions in the chat, and we will answer the questions throughout the conversation, as well as time that we have dedicated at the end for Q&A. All right, so today we're going to be covering how Mass General encourages nurses and other frontline caregivers to innovate and solve problems. We'll be covering the state of the nurse labor market today, a brief introduction to design thinking, an overview of the innovation programs at Mass General, how other hospitals and health systems can set up similar programs, and we'll discuss also the impact of innovation programs on nurse hiring and nurse retention at Mass General. We'll also be describing how Incredible Health can support and help, and then there will be Q&A. All right, let's dive right into it. So first, let's just start with a quick market overview, just so we all understand the state of affairs of US nursing and in the US today, in the country today. So this all starts with the fact that our demand for healthcare as a country keeps going up, right? Our population is aging. Therefore, that is putting more and more strain on our healthcare system. However, the supply of workers, so the actual healthcare workers themselves, has not kept up with that demand. Today, healthcare is the biggest labor sector in the country. 1 in 8 Americans works in healthcare, and it has been the biggest employment sector in the country since 2018. Now, for those of us on the call and those of us who have joined, we're all very familiar, likely, with this problem that is national. It is affecting every single state and every single location in the US today, and that is the ongoing nursing shortage. So we are on track to be 1.1 million nurses short by the end of this year. The annual acute care nurse turnover on average is at 18.7% right now. That is an increase of almost 2% since before the pandemic. Labor as a cost continues to go up. So labor as a percentage of revenue continues to increase. It's currently at 48%. It is at the most expensive levels ever. We are seeing wage inflation across the board, including among permanent nurses, as the labor shortage continues to worsen. And then it's taking on average 82 days to fill a permanent specialized nurse position, which is a very long time to staff these very important units. All right, so the other thing we wanted to share is just some data from Incredible Health. That's proprietary. It's data from over 400,000 nurses that have signed up on our platform. These are the top reasons why nurses leave jobs. So when nurses create profiles with Incredible Health, they're often citing or selecting the reasons why they are changing jobs. And this is in order of prevalence, right? So the number one reason why nurses change jobs is they're looking for career advancement. They're looking to expand their skills, move up to nurse management, cross-train, etc. The second most common reason is they're looking for more flexible schedules or more balance. The third most common is they're looking to reduce their commute time, or they're relocating, so something to do with geography. And the fourth reason is compensation. All right, so let's transition, now that we have like the lay of the land, let's transition to the topic of design thinking. Because of this labor shortage, it's more important than ever to keep nurses engaged and excited about working at the bedside. And so Hiyam, you're using design and innovation to do just that. Before we get into the specifics of the actual program at Mass General, can you help us out with giving us an overview of design thinking?
Absolutely. And so just to back up a little bit,
Sure.
We all need to understand that through the innovation methodology and approaching innovation, design thinking and human-centered design is incredibly important to do that. And through that, then you will be anchored through empathy for the end user. So who are we trying to solve the problems for? And that leads us into making sure we have the right problem to solve. Because if you don't break that down initially, then your solution and everything else that goes beyond that, it really may not be as impactful as you had hoped it would be.
Yep, absolutely. So when thinking about, could you describe what is design thinking for the audience? So that
Right.
concept is pretty new to most of us here.
So the way we're doing it here in IDEO is one of the premier design companies in the world. But the way we think about it is just step back and saying, who am I trying to solve the problem for? And then really going in and understanding, and for most of us in healthcare, it's generally the patient and their families. So we need to understand how they learn, how they perceive education, how they want to be taken care of. What do their lives outside of the hospital look like? You know, when we talk about the social determinants of health, we need to understand who that person is in order to be able to have the right solution for them. So once we do that, then we can actually break down that problem, really break it down into little pieces, keep asking lots of questions like, why do we do things this way? Why does this impact this person that way, et cetera? Once we get to that, defining that problem, we can go ahead and start brainstorming ideas and solutions, and then quickly test them. And we can talk about that a little bit later in the controlled environment, and then create the prototypes. And what you're seeing here is not a linear path, because design thinking is very circular, back and forth. So you'll come up with a solution, you'll go out and test it very quickly, gather your information, go back and redesign it or retest it, re-implement it, and things like that. So it's a very rapid cycle that you do until you get to the very end.
Got it. Okay, so when we hear the words like innovation or even design thinking, we think high tech, but that's not at all what you mean, right?
Not at all. And in fact, we make that known that it could be, we're agnostic. So it's high tech, low tech, no tech. It could be a very innovative process improvement, for example. So we're open to all ideas. There are many problems in healthcare that we can solve. And I think lots of people think technology, or is it a product and things like that, or a device. But we try to negate all of that. So
I'm going to stop sharing slides, and we'd love to go into more in depth about what innovation is at Mass General. So we actually use a very similar method of solving nurse hiring problems at Incredible Health, right? So we're constantly using this type of design thinking, but for many hospitals and health systems, it's a newer approach. So how do you translate that design thinking framework into innovation at Mass General?
So it's been a long process, but and meaning that, I think innovation is, when we say innovation, it's a fairly new concept really for people, especially within the design thinking process. And so our chief nurse, who was very visionary, decided that we were going to trial this and send out, we initially just very, we sent out an email and said, okay, everybody, what are your pain points? And give us your solutions to those pain points. We didn't put any parameters, because I think sometimes when you put too many parameters, it can actually kill creativity. So we wanted to assess, how did the staff define innovation? Number one. Number two is it gave the chief nurse insight into the pain points at the front line. And then three, we came back and we wanted to understand, how they thought about solutions. So it was a very, very informative process that we did. So those 2 years that we did that, we received about 40 applications. And we asked, it was just an application and a budget, give us your budget, what it would take to improve that idea. And then we had a committee who voted for the most impactful solutions. And so then I would take those winners, and we had 2 each year, and then I would mentor them. And that mentoring included problem breaking down and defining the problem, and then empathizing with our end users, and then going through that entire process of the innovation methodology.
Okay. So could you walk us through like a few examples of what, what came out of that?
Yeah, so initially, so for central line infection, the other thing I wanted to say was we really wanted to choose the ideas that were coming forward that would also be a pain point for the hospital. So patient falls, central line infections. And the reason why that was really a strategic move, so that nurses could actually build credibility about the solutions they come up with. And so one of them was for the neonatal intensive care unit and the medical intensive care unit, and really essentially just stealing a systems engineering approach that manufacturing plants use, which was just a simple flip chart, and apply it to medicine. And so what that did was through rounding on each patient, and I think a lot of hospitals are actually doing this, they discuss the patient, why they have a central line, why does it need to stay in, et cetera. And then it just really elevated everyone's attention to that central line. And when can we pull this out? And at the end of the week, if there were no central line infections, then they would flip the chart. And really the staff was getting very excited about it. And at some point they started to play the Rocky music prior to flipping the chart for each week. And the MICU went about 32 weeks without an infection. And the NICU went 733, it's probably more at this point, days without an infection. And then we got an infection. And then the staff was really upset. And what we did was we really wanted to show them that it's okay to fail. What we call controlled failure in medicine. We wouldn't want to hurt any patients. But this opportunity really led us to understand why we were still getting an infection. And through that delayering process, we realized that for patients that we inserted the central line, that we were able to have central line free infections. Mm-hmm. But because we're we're a tertiary care center, some of the transfer patients were still getting infections. So this taught us to really pivot, and then maybe they needed a different approach. So they started to understand, I see what you mean now. So we've learned from that, where the NICU took that opportunity to redesign the tubing. So they worked with the company and started to think about what are all the ways bacteria can enter into the system, and then closed off that tubing. So it's really about teaching that failure can be opportunities. And now we started to upskill the staff and how to approach these problems.
Got it. I love that how every week that didn't have an infection, you play Rocky music and flip the chart. That's great. So you celebrate successes as well.
Exactly.
Okay, so now that you've gotten enthusiasm from the clinical workforce, including nurses, and they're submitting ideas, like how do you make sure that these ideas don't just sit on someone's computer or sit in some backlog somewhere?
Well, when we first started out, these were called Idea Awards, IDA. And so since there weren't that many, the ones that I took over were more innovative in nature, but there were research ideas coming through. So luckily we have a very robust nurse scientist research center. So we sent those proposals to the research center. So we were able to do that. But more recently, we received many, many ideas. And that we're still going through. In addition to the winners, we're sort of bucketing all the ideas for the leadership. So I can sit and meet with them and say, here are all the ideas that came through. And, so the leadership was very supportive in trying to push those through as much as possible.
Got it. And when you say there's awards or winners, what do you mean by that? Like those are the ideas that get selected or that actually succeed, or yeah.
Right. So the initially when we did the Idea Awards, there were 2 winners a year that received $5,000 to pursue or to advance their idea. And this was all done through philanthropy. Because I know many institutions will say, well, we don't have money for this, and how can we do that? So luckily we did receive philanthropy, and we'll put that through to the Idea Awards. The winners are the ones that will get that money and my mentoring along with that.
Got it. Okay. And so when did this program start? When did this start? And then how has it evolved like over time?
So the Idea Award started in 2016, and we had to, pause like everyone did through the pandemic. But that pause really gave me a lot of time to reflect, because what you saw each year with the Idea Awards was the same or the same role types of cohort submitting their ideas. And I really, really was just very passionate about the very, very end of the front line. So in addition to the nurses, we wanted therapists, we wanted social workers, we wanted the secretaries that are sitting on the units or in ambulatory. Lots of times when I'm in the units, I'll see the environmental service person standing, waiting for a room to be cleaned, and they're hearing and seeing all this activity. And we wanted everyone to be able to come into this ideas symposium.
Got it. And then my understanding is that you transitioned to a more phased approach, like you started organizing in a way based on phases. Yeah.
So we teamed up, we collaborated with the Health Transformation Lab here. That has we developed a proprietary platform. So in the past, it was an email that went out to people, where this was actually a platform where they can submit their ideas. So a couple of things, we wanted to really lower the barrier. So rather than a big, long application, we learned a lot from that first idea phase. And putting a budget together, I think that was also a barrier. So we lowered the first phase, which was just idea submission. What is your problem? And what are your thoughts about a solution? And that was it, just a few sentences. Yep. And also we had it out for about 4 to 6 weeks, and people could, scan on their QR code and submit their idea through that or on a computer. We had posters everywhere, just really eliciting those ideas. So we lowered that barrier for submission. That was the first phase. The second phase, rather than us having a committee and voting on the ideas, it was crowd voted. So it was the same 8,000 staff received the platform to, okay, now that the ideas are in, go in and vote for your favorite idea. And what that allowed us to do is really, what rose to the top meant that those ideas or problems was what resonated with the majority of the staff. And so just to let you know, we received 252 ideas this time, and then over 15,000 votes. So it's telling us that this is what the frontline staff is saying are real problem points. And then the top 40 crowd voted ideas were actually invited to submit the full application. And again, if you recall, I said there was a lot of barriers to really submitting an application. So we had office hours. People could just tap into us, how to fill out my application. What is a budget? Helping them put in a budget. Or some even were reaching out as, do you think this idea is a good idea? And we're like, yes, submit it. All ideas are good. And so just learning from the past, we were able to sort of course correct in this platform.
Got it. And then can you help us understand sort of the incentives that you put in place for these phases?
Right. And so another, the Health Transformation Lab has done this sort of idea submission in the past. And what they've learned is that incentivizing staff to submit ideas really works. So we had pens that said, be an innovative disruptor. We had stickers that went on people's computers. We gave out Amazon gift cards for the first, 40 submissions and things like that. And as I delivered these, we're still delivering them because we had so many ideas. They were just so happy and engaged, and they were, even if it was a pen, they were so excited to get their pen. So it really mobilized the staff through that. And another learning really is that we included our leadership right from the beginning, and all throughout this process, they were helping us make decisions, and they were very, very involved. And I think for them, it really made them really understand or assess how big is the gap from people sitting in the C-suite to the front line. And so we really tried to close that gap, which is tremendous. And even for those staff that didn't win the money and the mentorship, we are, and the leadership is very committed to try to implementing as much as possible, number one, and number two, involving those staff that actually put in those ideas, which is also another big win.
Okay, and then how are you supporting frontline leaders to make sure this program is successful?
So what I'm doing, and I've already met with only 2, so they have time. So I downloaded, as I said, I bucketed all their ideas under their purview, and together we talked through them and what it would take to implement them. And so they're incredibly busy, and this is what I want to do. I don't want people to say, well, I gave my idea, but I don't know where it is or where it's gone. And so I'm really, really committed to trying to help push those through as much as possible. And then we're communicating that all the time to the staff.
Got it. I'm just curious, look, in this time, I mean, everyone's working a lot, right? The nursing leaders, the nurses at the bedside. How do you make sure that, this program is even given attention by the staff?
Well, we were really concerned about that,
Yep.
were anybody going to pay attention to the emails and all the incentives, but people, I think when staff have control or can have a voice over their lives, their work lives, I think they were very committed. And by the sheer number of votes and ideas submitted really told us that this was very important to them. We also have teamed up with the Harvard University Innovation Science Lab, because we put in an IRB. We'll be studying this from a behavioral economics perspective. Yep. How do staff engage, or how do employees engage, period, when it's above and beyond their job responsibilities? And so we're learning a lot. And this platform was powerful because it allowed us to really do a lot of data analytics. So for example, what role types really submitted ideas, and who do we need to really reach out to in a more robust way the next time? And the tenure of an employee was about 11 and a half years. So what's happening at the very beginning of a career versus someone who's much more experienced and has been here for a long time. So we'll be looking at those things. Ethnicity, we're looking at ethnicity. We're looking at a lot of things, and hopefully we'll be publishing soon as we analyze all the data.
Got it. And so let me make sure I've understood. You're analyzing, you're looking at this from a behavioral economics standpoint, and you're trying to see the impact of a program like this it has on the workers themselves.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
Do they feel psychologically safe to
Yep.
speak up? You know, what happens afterwards when their ideas implemented, and all sorts of things. We haven't completely, we just ended the Etherdome Challenge in December. So we're still analyzing and really talking through what our findings were.
Okay. So there's a lot of nurse leaders on the call today, and you know, listening to this recording afterwards as well. So what advice would you have for leaders who are looking to start their own innovation programs?
Yeah, I think number one is really reaching out to the staff, because I think there's some nurses that might be very interested in this. And then really letting them lead it. And you don't have to start in, you know, again, we started with an email, we started out with a call, give us your ideas. We met, we just, you know, we talked through the ideas, which ones would be most impactful, which ones do we want to do. And what we find too is that you'll have different buckets. So you'll have, let's just do it. Let's just implement it. This is so simple. Let's just do it. Oh my God, why didn't we think about this before? And then there's another level where it might take a little more time and resources. And, you know, again, very high level. But, you know, most systems, if it's an IT problem, I go to our IT colleagues and say, look, well, what do we need to do to implement this? This came out of, you know, we use Epic. What can we do? I go to our Epic informatics people. What is this, you know, out of bounds, or do we think we can do this easily? And a lot of these ideas are starting to get implemented. So that's where you start, and then see what happens.
Got it. So you start, honestly, you start pretty cheap if it's just an email.
Very.
Okay, that's very affordable. Great. And then what's the role of leadership, right? To in terms of just getting a program like this going?
Well, I think we have to convince leadership. So we can't just, you know, I think everybody thinks innovation is just a new shiny word out there, but I think once the leadership sees the impact, and I always tell the staff, we need to measure everything, and then we go back and we feed it back to the leadership, and they're really, you know, our quality and safety office was so happy about the central line infection rates,
yeah. Right?
And so you start to bring in people in the leadership forum and just you know, show them what we can accomplish. I think it's really critical that we do that, and nurses and therapists and stuff, you know, if you think about how much time they're spending with patients, they're most you know, well positioned to really identify those gaps, those challenges, even in workflows and things like that. We just need to get them to the table and listen.
Got it. And you mentioned earlier that your CNO is very supportive of this.
Yes.
What drives that? Like what is it that makes her extremely supportive of the innovation?
I think she understood innovation after we explained it, what we really wanted to do. And I think the ANCC helps, because now if you're a magnet hospital, they're collecting all these things, and one bucket now is innovation.
Got it.
And so it really, I think it helps her. I think it helps leaders say, look, if we want to be magnet designated, these are the things that we need to do. And so, you know, it keeps going up the chain of command.
Got it. And then once the program gets started, what advice would you have to accelerate a program?
Right. I think what I've learned is, you know, when we first started this program, I was the nursing director in the ambulatory setting. And I did this above and beyond because, you know, we were really just testing. This was our pilot. Was this going to work? And I was really, I didn't want to leave my job. And then, you know, it didn't work out. And so, but what I've realized is, because now I'm doing this full time, because we built that credibility, you really need somebody sort of overseeing the program and really implementing this. And so even if it's 10 hours a week, 20 hours, start somewhere, just to get it going and sustaining it. Because I think, there can be some frustration if you start something and then not carry through. It'll be here we go, yet another thing that just happened.
Got it. And so let's say there's leaders on the call who want to get this program started, and it's getting started, and they want to start dedicating a leader to it. Like they want their own version of Hiyam, right? And whether it's 10 hours, 20 hours, and eventually full time. Can you just describe the responsibilities of your role in case others on the call want to sort of replicate it?
Sure. So my role is that, I'll run the platform. We go out and elicit the information, and I'm on the units and in the ambulatory often, because I feel like I stay connected to the real issues at the front line. And so that helps with, so for the Etherdome Challenge, for the IDEA Awards, we didn't really put parameters, but for the Etherdome Challenge, we had buckets. So capacity, we want to hear about capacity management issues, care team communication, patient communication, acuity, how do we do real-time learning for staff as patients get sicker and sicker. And then we always have an other bucket so that people can just put in any idea and solution into that. So I think really coming up with some of those, and then we did that with leadership, so it wasn't just done in solo. And then running the marathon, it felt like a marathon, running the platform, really communicating with staff, being there to help with office hours. But I do think if they do assign someone to do this, I think there needs to be some training in design thinking, and in innovation methodology, and there's plenty of places to do that. And UPenn has a wonderful free course that nurses and leadership can take and understand it.
Got it. And then in addition to managing the IDEA program, my understanding is you also develop external partnerships too and work with the NIH.
Yes,
Yeah.
so the NIH, we've been meeting quite a bit, and really it's to help them. I think they're very committed to getting funds out there to nurses to do research. And what we're trying to tell them is the research is fairly robust, but there's a gap for innovation, right? And so we want more funding to go to innovation, because before it becomes evidence-based practice, or there's all this funding that needs to occur to push through some of these ideas and prototypes and testing and things like that. So that's what we're working with the NIH. Marion Leary and myself from UPenn gave them a presentation and all about what she's doing in the academic center, teaching nursing students, and then which carries over to practice, which is what I'm doing. And so, so that's what we're hoping the pivot will take place. They're very open to it. There were a bunch of researchers on the presentation, but they started to understand that there's this spot where it's really innovation-based metrics and science before you get to the evidence-based.
Got it. And then you also play an important role in just supporting and training other nursing leaders at Mass General to help their teams innovate. Is that correct?
Exactly.
Yeah.
So what we're doing here, so if I teach a person, we go through that whole innovation methodology. The hope is they go back to their unit and they become sort of the innovation champion on their unit. And so as problems arise and ways to solve them become apparent, that they're the ones helping. And then it is actually happening, because I check in with the staff and say, they're like, everybody's coming to me, and it's great. And that's what we want to do.
Got it. Marion Leary says, thanks for the shout out.
Oh, is she on?
She's on.
Oh, hi, Marion.
And she shared the website for Design Thinking for Health. Great. So, innovation, many nursing leaders, HR leaders, operations leaders, honestly, all the way up to the CEO, they're trying to drive nurse hiring and nurse retention, right? And teams with innovation programs sort of have a leg up in some ways. So curious, like what are your thoughts on what impact these kinds of programs can have, and these efforts, innovation efforts can have on, nurse hiring or nurse retention?
And so my response to that is really anecdotal, because everyone I've worked with has always said, and, oh, and told my boss as well, how transformational it's been. Because through the mentoring, they come in and we start with this whole design thinking process and empathizing, breaking down their problem. They're rolling their eyes like, oh, why do we have to do this? But then they realize the impact and how much their solution actually changes throughout that process. And they're very happy. And what they're saying to me, as well as my leadership, is that if they can continue to be creative and coming up with solutions like this, they don't want to leave the bedside, because they recognize, and when I say bedside, I don't mean just inpatient. There's the ambulatory sites, the community health centers where we're doing a lot of work. They want to stay taking care of patients, because this is where they come up with all these solutions. So we really need to study that. But when I watch my daughter, just the way every decision she makes about college professors and, everything these kids do, that generations, I would say that it's not going to be far off that a nursing graduate will be looking to see what people can offer, what institutions offer, and then apply. I mean, and innovation is only one tool in a large toolbox. So we have to keep all that in mind as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, a nurse retention strategy or nurse hiring strategy is multifaceted, but
yes,
what we're seeing is that employers that have career advancement programs, that offer cross training, that of course, have the compensation piece is sort of like table stakes, right? So
right.
Layering on top of that career advancement programs, innovation programs, allowing for more flexible scheduling. These are all things that nurses are looking for today.
Right.
And they are selecting employers based on that.
I agree. And I think, again, when we talk about flexible schedules, or we talk about anything, we've got to involve that front line. So that they can come up with the solutions that work. And they're pretty creative. And because I think people worry, people are going to come up with all these crazy schedules we won't be able to accommodate. But I think if you put some of the standards or guidelines or guardrails in place, I think they'll surprise us all.
Great. So in the next few minutes, I'd just love to provide a quick overview for what is Incredible Health and how we support teams. And then there's going to be plenty of time for Q&A. So for those of you in the audience, please do submit your questions as we're going along here too. All right, so Incredible Health is a marketplace technology, and hospitals and health systems, they use our custom matching technology to hire high quality permanent nurses in less than 20 days. Our retention rates that we track on our platform are 15% higher than the baseline. And so a lot of that is because nurses were able to consider multiple opportunities before selecting a specific hospital. We're used by over 500 hospitals and health systems across the country, including very large ones like HCA Healthcare and Kaiser Permanente. We're used by academic medical centers as well, like Stanford and Cedars-Sinai, and lots of community hospitals as well. As far as like what's the secret sauce here in terms of like what was our early design thinking at the beginning when we started the company, really the solutions that we really drove towards were, first, the employers apply to the talent instead of the other way around. We knew that nurses were in very, very high demand, but the current way of just waiting for nurses to apply to employers was not working particularly well. And nurses were often saying, I apply to 10, 15 places and I don't even hear back. And so we figured, okay, let's just flip the script and have the employers apply to the nurses instead. And then we've also automated the screening of the talent. And so we're able to serve up high quality supply or talent to the employers. And then we also have created custom matching algorithms for every employer that we work with. So let's say you are a nurse recruiter at Mass General and you log in, like you don't really want to see 200 nurses. You want to see 11 that are the exact right fit for you at that time, given the units that you're looking for and the other preferences you have. It's the same thing from the nurse's perspective. Like, let's say you are a highly sought after OR nurse or ICU nurse, or any other type of nurse these days, frankly. Like, you don't really want to hear from 100 employers. You want to hear from 4 or 5 that are the best fit for you. And then we also provide a robust set of data analytics to nursing and HR leaders, so they're able to troubleshoot what's going on in their hiring process and what bottlenecks exist too. The other thing that we do is we offer a whole range of free tools and services completely free to nurses. You know, the entire hiring platform is free for nurses, of course, but we also offer free continuing education for every single nurse in the country, free salary estimators. We have a talent advocates, or these are like career coaches that support our nurses on our platform. There's also an advice platform or a social network for nurses built into our Incredible Health apps, where a nurse can ask a question and get an pretty personalized and highly specific answer as well. So all of this is available in our Incredible Health apps on iOS and Android, and available for free to every single nurse in the country. I just wanted to share a little more data with everybody on the call. You know, the data that we have shows that 68% of nurses accept the very first offer they receive. And so that really speaks to the importance of speed and having streamlined hiring operations. And then 61% of nurses accept the very first offer, even if the second or third offer ends up being higher compensation. So really having extremely effective and streamlined hiring operations is really is one of the things that's setting employers apart. And in many cases, in many of the markets where we operate, speed is even more important than the brand, than the wage, and than the than the reputation of the health system. You know, it really is very, very important to have streamlined operations when it comes to hiring. This is just data from one of the clients. This happens to be an LA team. For this team, we were able to reduce their hiring from 66 days down to 19 days. And really where we had the biggest impact was on time to source, which is usually what really drags out the days to fill. This is a true collaboration. When Incredible Health is working with our hospital partners, it takes both parties to succeed here. And so these are the 8 steps of the hiring process. And so Incredible Health software and services taking care of the first 4 steps. We're sourcing the talent, making sure they're qualified, confirming they're interested, and getting that first phone screen automatically scheduled with the nurse recruiter at the hospital. And then at that point, I mean, we use Stanford as an example here. The Stanford team is really taking over at that point, and they're completing those phone screens, getting hiring manager interviews scheduled, getting offers out, and getting offers accepted. This is a new model in talent acquisition, where it's enabling nurse recruiters and nurse HR teams to operate at the top of their skill set or the top of their license, which is really speaking with candidates and building relationships with hiring managers. And it really relieves them of administrative work that's involved with sourcing and screening upfront. So would love to kind of walk through any questions that have been submitted as well. All right, there's a few questions. All right. And then I also just shared there the email questions@incrediblehealth.com in case anyone in the audience has more questions after the call has ended too. So one question that came through is I think there's an ask for a few more examples of what ideas were implemented. You mentioned the central line example. Curious, Hiyam, if you have any others that you can share with us.
Yes, so one of the nurses who worked on a heme oncology unit was devising a way to collect samples. Initially, it was started for immunosuppressed patients. And this mechanism of downloading the lab bags, we call it Grab-a-Lab, was supposed to go inside the room. And as we were incubating it, of course, the pandemic hit. And then suddenly we were able to pivot. Again, you'll hear that word a lot in innovation is, you're learning something and then you quickly pivot. And now we rolled it out to all our test sites. Our partner hospitals, et cetera. And it's essentially you just roll out, you just pull out the bags when your hands are clean. And it was really critical during the pandemic. And then the nurse would draw the labs. She'd need another nurse on the other side to take the labs, to put them in a clean bag, et cetera. And this mechanism just took place of that second person. But even when they didn't have a second person, the nurses were taping bags to the walls, et cetera. Again, this machine took place of that and loved it. And we still have it out in the test sites. They won't give it back. So even though they're prototypes, they just won't give them back because it became so much more efficient. Everything was clean. The people in the laboratory loved it because they knew those bags were coming down without any, as you can see, the blood or anything else on the bag. So That's another idea. We have another project that we're working on. We have prototypes already, which is for ALS patients, and this came from occupational therapists. So to keep them independent with their tube feedings for as long as possible. And this feeding mechanism actually adapts to their decline, which is pretty awesome. And we will be speaking to outside industry about that to get that going. And I know, Iman, you asked me about industry players, and I don't think I ever asked about, I never responded, which is we can't solve everything, but what we would like to do is shift that paradigm. So before industry commercializes their products or their equipment or whatever, they actually come in and seek our assistance before their final prototype. And those are some of the collaborations that we're forging currently. And it would also gives us the opportunity, like this ALS feeding device, to actually partner with industry for them to take over and commercialize it for us. So there's all different ways we're working.
Great. So this is a question that came in from Laura. She's curious about how many people work in your department and what background do they have?
So it's just me, and I just hired a project manager for 20 hours. So we don't really have, again, this is a very young center, meaning, just I took over in 2019, but it was just prior to the pandemic. So we're building slowly. But I would imagine that we're probably going to be hiring more frontline caregivers eventually to help with this. I'm meeting with another nurse across the country, and they're starting an innovation committee. Again, when leaders ask, where do I start? They're going to start with an innovation committee. So we'll see where that takes us. That's still very young in production. So there's different ways, and I'm happy to talk to anyone that would want more advice and, just understanding their system and how things would work better for them.
Okay, that sounds good. Another question that came through for you, Hiyam, is from Justin, who's a nurse. Could you speak a little bit on how you tackle the culture change of innovation in your organization, and how you balance that with evidence-based practice, research, and quality improvement?
So that's a really important question. I can say, luckily, I come from a very innovative culture, a culture of collaboration. So I understand, because I've been at other cultures where that wasn't the case. So luckily that's that. And so what we do a lot of work when we have these innovations or these solutions. We apply a lot of implementation science, measuring metrics. I work closely with quality and safety. I work closely because it overlaps a lot with quality and safety, what we do. So in innovation, there's a lot of testing. Let's say it's a device that we put out as Grab-a-Lab, let's put that as an example. We put it out. We did a lot of observational studies, and then we started to see other case uses for their iPhones, et cetera, for the blood glucose monitors as well. And so we learned a lot just from observation, but we also did surveys. We broke things. We purposely broke things. We wanted to hear all negative. That's all the documentation you're collecting throughout the innovation-based process. And then anything that touches patients, we will be studying through an IRB and doing research and evidence-based. So it's all a process. But we'll get there.
All right. Another question came through from Molly. I love hearing about how you've gotten frontline nurses excited about innovation and design thinking. Curious if you have any ideas or thoughts on how to do the same with research and the generation of new knowledge.
Yes, so I work very close, because I'm not a nurse scientist, so I work very closely with my nurse scientists. In fact, we just submitted for a huge grant, hopefully that it will go through, but you need to work with your nurse scientists who are interested in this type of research. especially with innovation. And luckily I had that person, and we're doing the work together. So what I do initially is all what I spoke about, the implementation science, the metrics, and all about the prototyping. And then she comes in for the research part and how we're going to study that. I hope that answered your question.
Great. This next question is from Bruce. Just curious if you have found ways to connect with experienced nurses.
We love our experienced nurses, but I think, again, the average tenure was 11 and a half years. So we had lots of, nurses that were very experienced that submitted ideas. And I just think just keep doing this. And I think really communicating back to the staff what's been implemented. We heard from you, this is what's been implemented. And those are the things that we're going to be doing. And hopefully for the next challenge, we'll get more and more ideas and more engagement.
Well, I guess the next question is from Bruce. What have you done to get more nurses in remote or rural areas at Incredible Health? It's an excellent question, Bruce. We're continuing to expand our talent growth strategy to include not just urban areas, but rural areas too. There's still more progress that we need to do in attracting rural talent to the Incredible Health platform. We do a combination of things, including offering the free products, the free services, like continuing education, salary estimators, so on, to every single nurse in the country. We also have really increased our reactivation campaigns, so remarketing to our existing database and promoting the more rural areas, as well as campaigns around relocation. We're noticing that 1/3 of the nurses on our platform that are hired are relocating from a completely different location. But continuing to drive SEO or our organic traffic. So it's definitely a work in progress. I think full disclosure, Incredible Health works really, really well in urban areas, but we're not as good in rural areas because we can't find as much talent there or can't attract as much talent there. All right. Any other questions that? For those of you that wanted to get in touch, we just shared the details in the chat. You can email us at questions@incrediblehealth.com. We do have a website, incrediblehealth.com. You can also request a demo, and that the URL has been shared in the chat as well. Hiyam, if anyone had more questions for you, we'll route them to you, the ones that get sent to us, but any particular social platform where you're active, what's the best way for people to get in touch?
Yes, LinkedIn is probably the best.
Okay.
And yeah.
Right.
And I do want to say the other thing, just to put in a plug for SONCIEL, which is the Society of Nurse Innovators, Entrepreneurs, and Leaders, with Microsoft and Johnson & Johnson. Have your nurses attend the hackathons that they run, and they will really learn quite a bit just over that weekend.
Yeah, I totally agree. I was a judge in the last hackathon, and yeah, had a great time. And a lot of great ideas were submitted and discussed. All right. Thank you everyone for joining. Appreciate everyone's time, and thank you for attending. This session was recorded, so it will be sent out to all attendees as well. And you're welcome to connect with me or Hiyam on LinkedIn. And we look forward to the next event. Thank you, Hiyam, so much for your time today. Really appreciate it.
Thank you so much. It was a pleasure.
All right.